Hey everybody, welcome to another reseller vlog. So we're gonna start today with an amazing art haul. I got a bunch of great pieces from another reseller. She was ready to donate these. And I said, wait, I wanna look through them. So she sent me some pictures and I was like, yes, I am coming over and I'm going to buy several of the pieces in your redonate pile. And then after the haul, I'm gonna show you some of the tools and supplies I use to actually repair vintage art that I get. I buy a lot of damaged art and sometimes the damage adds to the character. And then other times, just doing a little bit of touch-up can actually increase the value. So I'm gonna show you all the tools and supplies that I use. So this art haul actually came from one single seller and her name is Rebecca, and I would tag her if I could, but she does not have Instagram, so I can't tag her, or really any social media that I can tag her in. So she sells primarily on Facebook Marketplace, and I actually met her while shopping. Now I'm a very nosy shopper when I'm out thrifting. I look in people's carts, I ask them about their finds, I praise what they have discovered on the shelves. And I do that because I just genuinely love to talk to people about thrifting and what they find, but also because I want to forge connections with other resellers. And if I hadn't made this like random connection with Rebecca, I may never have scored all this amazing art from her. So a lot of people think other resellers are your competition, but they're not. Because sometimes what they can't sell, you can. So I have a lot of great pieces. Most of them I just kind of paid what she probably paid at the Goodwill where she got the artwork. So anywhere from like $3 to like $13 for the bigger pieces. So some of this stuff is gonna hit Etsy, and then a lot of it will go to my vintage booth because I sell a lot of art there. And it's just, you know, saves me from having to ship it. You guys know I hate shipping really anything. But art is especially hard because it just requires bigger boxes, it's more expensive. But anyways, enough chit chat. Let's get into all the cool pieces that I have to show you. So first up is this pear painting. It's actually painted on wood block, which I love, and it's very detailed and cheerful. I actually picked up a pear painting a few months ago, and I was like, oh, I didn't know how I felt about the colors because it felt very Tuscan. This kind of gives me a Tuscan vibe as well. I grew up with Tuscan decor in the home, and so it's hard for me to kind of go back to that. But it's just so well done, and that pear painting sold like this. And so I was like, oh, maybe pears are a thing because of kitchens, of course. And I really do like the more cheerful green background. So again, anywhere from like $3 to $13 in terms of what I paid, and this will be on Etsy. So another piece that's going to be on Etsy is this really pretty building. Again, very cheerful color palette. Loved the blue. I was tempted to save this until I found a frame, and I may look at my framing area before I list this to see if I have like a loose frame that can fit this. We'll see. Otherwise, I'll just sell it as is. It was technically painted on canvas, but then they adhered it to board rather than painted on canvas board. But it's essentially on canvas board. I buy a lot of canvas board art when I'm in Europe. It's really the most inexpensive way to get original art home, and then they pack flat, which is amazing. But this will be on Etsy, either framed or unframed. So I think we're just gonna rapid fire through the stuff that will likely be on Etsy because that's what's available to all of you guys watching, unless you're in Portland, and then you can go to my booth. This piece I thought was lovely and delicate. This is actually on canvas, and the color palette to me is just so soft. And so this, I was like, yes, 100%, grabbing that. Another like really cheerful one. Look at the flowers. I sell a ton of floral art of basically all kinds. Florals are super in, like in terms of like trends. And then a lot of people just love floral art like myself clearly. So this, I'm like, oh, do I want to keep it? But no, this will be for you guys. Just a really lovely piece. And then this piece, anything that looks like it could be somewhere else, like somewhere that like transports you to another country, always has a buyer. Sometimes people actually recognize where it's at and will remind them of somewhere where they traveled. And of course they didn't pick up original art because original art on travels can be expensive. So they like to pick up pieces like this that remind them of where they went. And it's just a great memory on their wall. So yeah, this on Etsy too. The next one is a seascape, and I love seascapes. And this one, I just love the bird in the center, which I thought was great. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with selling seascapes because sometimes they sell and sometimes they don't. But because I live so close to the coast, I can't. I have to pick them up when I see them, especially when they're well done. I think my biggest pet peeve is when the color palette is just like too like sunset or sunrise, or the blues are just like almost like turquoise versus like ocean blue, if that makes sense. We only have like ocean blue out here. We don't have like turquoise, like tropical blue. So when I see the tropical ones, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that exists in nature around here. But anyways, I thought this was really great because of the bird. So what actually kicked off our conversation about art, and the reason why I ended up getting this haul, is because I was talking to her about seasonal art and how I sell a lot of seasonal art. And she said that she struggles to sell seasonal paintings. And I'm like, well, just let me know. Send me pictures of what you have and maybe I could buy them. And then so that's what kicked off the conversation of me purchasing more pieces from her. But this is amazing. There are so many people when they decorate seasonally, especially for like Christmas time, that they don't love the Christmas color palette because it just clashes with their neutral home. But a painting like this allows you to get that vibe without actually having to scream like Christmas or the holidays. So this painting I thought was wonderful. And one of my theories about seasonal art is that because there is so little seasonal art out there that isn't cheesy, that wasn't like in a Home Goods or a Hobby Lobby, I think people's expectations of how good seasonal art is lower because it just doesn't really exist like the other types of art, like just regular like landscapes and stuff. So I saw a lot of like kind of more mediocre or quirky seasonal art because I think people just want any sort of original art on their walls that nods to that time of year. So yeah, that's like my theory. So you'll have to let me know if you think that like holds up based on like your seasonal art sales. So now on to some art that I may bring to my booth, but if you want it, just let me know. Now this piece I thought was very sweet and very simple and light. And I love the simplicity of it, that every time I look at it, it just has a sense of calm. And so that's why I wanted to get it. So I was gonna bring this to my booth, but if this is something you guys want, let me know. It's a bit of an odd size. It's a 10 by 14, so it's not easily like reframed in a frame. Most of the frames that I have are like 8 by 10s. So I would have to cut this down, and I know how you feel about me cutting it down. The one time I talked about cutting it down, the internet lost their minds. So I won't be doing that again, or at least telling you I'm going to do that, but I promise I'm not going to do that for this. So those will probably go to my booth, but if you want it, let me know. Okay, just a few more pieces. So I got this beautiful floral. Now, some people have a love-hate relationship with this style floral and the color palette because it definitely speaks to a very particular time and decor. But there are a lot of people who did not live through that time period who really like this. And these pastels and mauves, you know, people love, I mean, I love mauve. Actually, does this belong here? I think it does. What do we think? Okay, I may have talked myself into it. Gosh darn it. That's what happens when I'm like, I can see myself in the background. I'm like, oh, that piece looks at home here. Yeah, now it's mine. Okay, so I'm probably going to sell this. We'll see. We'll see. I guess check Etsy and see. This piece I thought was really interesting. And it's like, I don't know how well done it is. This is an example of a piece of art that I'm like, it kind of is on the border of well done, like enough. But I liked how moody and the color palette was. Like it's very dark vibes. And I thought that was kind of cool. So that's why I grabbed it out of her pile. I'll probably take this to my booth. This floral I was very excited about. I thought it was really pretty. I don't find purples, and I believe these are probably, are these hydrangeas maybe? Maybe hydrangeas. I will probably put this up on Etsy because I have a lot of dedicated floral buyers out there on Etsy, and the purples you just don't find often. And I thought this was really, really pretty. And then a couple of really big pieces that are gonna go to my booth. Now, I actually bought this piece, which is huge, and I thought really interesting, like very, very bright. I got this piece, and then I also got this piece, more so for the wood framing that is around it. So a lot of like contemporary modern art like this, they're framed in these very simple, almost like floating frame situations. And to buy that wood, it's not like it's super expensive, but you know, it's not necessarily cheap. Lumber's expensive these days. And also to get them where the color is like aged perfectly for the time period of art is hard, because when you buy this style of wood at your local lumberyard. It's like blonde, natural, and then you have to stain it. And I just love how this already has all that age. So when I pop a vintage painting in it, it's like we're to use that wood and replace it, it's already looking like it came from that time period because I don't have to fake the age. It is already truly aged. And so that's what I was thinking about actually popping the canvases out and using the wood for some of the artwork that I have in my own home that I really badly want to frame up like this, where it is the plain around the edges. So I may or may not do that. The bigger pieces, I haven't decided. And the last piece of art to show you is this really beautiful boat painting. And people do love a boat painting. I just think this one is really, really great. And I just love the colors of it. It's just so cheap. It matches my shirt. I feel like I'm almost like melting into the painting because my hair and my shirt color. But I thought this one was lovely. I haven't decided if I want to put this one on Etsy because it will require a very large box. So we'll see. We'll see. I know I should not be picking up big art. I tell you guys this all the time. But then when I see big art I like, I'm just powerless against it because it's, you know, an original. So anyways, that is all the art from the haul. So a ton of amazing pieces ranging from like $3 to like $13. Like I think like this one was like 13. So great prices. So thank you, Rebecca, if you're watching. Really appreciate it. And I'll also like, you know, keep sending me messages of art that you're not sure you want to donate back or not, and I'd be happy to take it off your hands. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears. I'm going to show you the supplies and tools I use to repair art that needs a little bit of love and care. So let's talk about all the tools and supplies that I use to make repairs on vintage art. And now when I say repairs, I'm just color correcting a spot that may have had a scratch or chipped away. I am not like repairing holes and slashes. Those imperfections I usually leave in the piece and I just make a notation if I'm selling it online because I don't have the skill set to make those types of repairs. I'm mostly just correcting little things with the supplies and very limited like artistic talent that I have. But I think it's something that you guys could do too. So I know you're probably wondering, how do I decide what to repair and what I just leave alone? Because with vintage art and antique art, a lot of times people really like the patina. They don't mind the holes and the slashes and the flaking paint and the scratches and scuffs on a frame. They think that's just part of the piece and its history and its old world charm, and they actually want that stuff to stay. But sometimes a piece, it just looks a little too tired to me. And almost everyone is okay with a vintage or antique piece of art looking really good. There's a certain set of people that actually really prefer the patina and they won't buy anything that looks pristine. But largely speaking, you have a wider buying audience if the piece that you're selling is in pretty good vintage shape. And when there's a piece of art that's really beautiful, but there's like a scratch in one spot, and that scratch, like you really zero in on when you look at the piece, that's the type of thing that I'll try and repair. Or if there's a little bit of flaking around the edges, I may repair that with a little bit as well. So it's kind of, it just depends on the piece. And I know that's probably not helpful. But I do think so many pieces are ignored because they have these like minor flaws. And I've certainly scored things at thrift stores because someone's like, oh, it has that big scratch. And I know just with a few minutes of painting and the right tools, I can bring it back to life and sell it for a lot more money. Okay, so now I want to talk about the actual paint supplies that I'm using. And these are my paint pens. And you guys have heard me talk about them a lot. And I've been terrible about actually telling you what brand they are. Now, these are just hobbyist paint pens. And the brand is Artistro. I got these from Amazon. I actually got this whole like 72 count supply because I wanted all the colors. So these are great. There are so many. They go on more opaque. So just know that you're not seeing through the paint. This is like an opaque paint. The problem with these sometimes is that they can be overly vibrant, which is a challenge when you're trying to color correct any type of vintage painting. Painting ages and patinas over time. Sometimes it's the paint itself that changes. UV light changes the paint, and then also nicotine and the environment can change the paint color. So I feel like the hardest thing for me when I'm color matching is actually getting it to be gloomy and dark and vintage enough with modern paints like this. But I sell a lot of florals and landscapes, and so as long as I have enough like florally colors and greens, which I do, because I got the biggest set, I'm usually able to color match enough. And these are great because they have two different tip sizes, like a very narrow one, like a fine one, and more of a dot tip. And they just work really well. So these are absolutely great and highly recommend the paint pens. So now I want to talk about the markers that I find invaluable. And I'm using these on the actual frames, the wood frames, and not on the painting itself, unless the painting has, you know, like browns in it. So one of you guys, like a few years ago, recommended the Colors of the World Crayola markers because they have so many amazing shades of brown. And then also they have like peachy tones too. The peaches and the pinks I don't find that I use very often, but in terms of having a wide variety of browns and taupes and tans, they're amazing. And the reason why I like kind of the water-based markers rather than the paint pens is this will go on and it's like opaque and it's thick and you can lose the wood grain underneath and it will look like you painted the wood frame. Where these, it's almost like they act like a stain. And when you put it on, you can kind of still see the grain below. So it's like, it's a little bit like of a staining property versus like you're actually putting paint on it. So I use these most often with frames, and usually you want kind of the darker the better. This one I use all the time. This is Stabilo, I think is how you call it. This is like a paint, or sorry, a marker brand that I actually got in Europe. I'm not sure who, yeah, Germany. So these are like a really well-known marker in like the art community, like people who are actual artists. But you can get like one-offs of these and don't have to buy a whole set. Usually if you go to an art supply store. And that's one thing you can do if you don't want to buy like a set like this that has a bajillion, you know, pens and you want just select ones because the art you sell is largely in these color palettes. You can go to like a Blick or another art supply store in your area and you can pick and choose the supplies that you use based on like the colors you think you're most often going to need to repair. So just keep that in mind. This is the pen that I use the most often because it's very dark. And the way it goes on just really works with most of the wood frames that I use. But also this guy, this just Crayola does the trick. And these do the trick too. And they're very inexpensive, which is what I love because I like to run a really tight ship and I don't like to necessarily buy super expensive supplies when I know something like this works just as well. So now I want to talk about the gold paint that I use. Now I use this Martha Stewart gold metallic paint and there are way better paints than this on the market. Like Rub and Buff has a whole line. And the reason why I'm using this is because I have it. I've had it for like 15 years. It's still probably 2/3 of the way full and I'm just too cheap to buy the other stuff. And so I usually have to mix this with brown or black because this is a little too vibrant for a lot of the gold things that I'm repairing. And so that's one thing you need to keep in mind. Again, like paintings, the gold paint around the frames, they also age over time. And sometimes they actually were antiqued right out of the gate. And to color match with modern metallic paints, you have to kind of tone them down a little bit because they're too vibrant. And if you don't, then you can definitely tell that you made a repair on it. So again, this is all like there's these things you have to do because we're selling vintage pieces and we're using modern paints that make the process a little bit tricky. But Rub and Buff supposedly has really good antique colored metallic paints. This one is just worked for me. And when I'm looking at like a gold gilt frame and how I decide whether or not I want to actually like repair the chipping away, it just depends on how uniform the chipping away is. Sometimes if it's kind of uniform all around and it just adds to that vibe, I'll leave it. But if there's like a substantial chip or flaking in one section that's really glaring and the rest of it looks good, that's when I'll go in and do a little bit of repair. I also repair a lot of Florentine pieces, like the trays and the plaques and other Florentine style things. Those were not built and made to last. They are the most delicate things. They do not hold up the test of time. Whatever paint they use, it's just like always gone by the time I find it. And so I do a lot of repairing with those because I find that they sell faster and better when they have that type of repair work done. And especially if it's something that's really easy for me to do. And doing the gold paint is pretty easy. So this is the gold paint I use. And I'll link some other options down below that are better than using ancient paint. But if you have ancient gold metallic paint. You're more than welcome to use it on your frames. So the last paint that I use are actually old paint by number pots that I get at the thrift store. So some of the thrift stores around town, they have the aisles with the bags and they like bundle art supplies and other stuff in. You can find these. And these are great. They're acrylic paints. These are great because it's a way to buy a ton of like pre-mixed colors and without having to actually go out and buy a whole set of acrylic paints and having to mix them yourself. Now, usually you have to do a little bit of mixing, but it saves you from having to buy really expensive art supplies at the art supply store, like a Michael's or something. So I buy these. The trouble with these, and if you know paint by numbers, they dry really flat and there's no sheen to it. And most of the artwork that we have has a little bit of sheen to it. And so that's really tricky when you're repairing art. Keep that in mind that you may perfectly color match it and it looks great when it's wet and then it dries too flat compared to the rest of the stuff that has a slight sheen. So these you have to use a little bit sparingly. Sometimes if you can buy another type of acrylic paint that has a natural like sheen still in it when it dries, you can use these to then help mix it and some sheen is still retained even though it's mixed with something that will go really flat and matte. But I still find them very helpful when I'm color matching certain sections, especially if it's really patterned, you might not tell. But these are something that have always come in handy too. But like I said, you have to be very careful when you're color matching and you're also sheen matching, like the luster. You have to keep that in mind when you're using something like this. That's very, very flat when it dries. Okay, so a few more things. So I use a variety of different brushes. You can use whatever you have on hand. Obviously a teeny tiny one that has like the tiniest little point. This is a number 2. This I use a lot. I use the number 2 size a ton because I'm usually color matching and correcting really small things. And so this is really great. And then I use this number 10 a lot and it's like it has a curved here. Just make sure that you're using brushes that have really soft bristles. Don't get the ones that have the really hard bristles because that will leave stroke marks more so than these that are really soft. I think these are technically like watercolor brushes. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can absolutely get a super cheapy pack and also look at the thrift stores for them. But the smaller the size, the more likely you're going to be using it because you're just going to correct little bits. And then a couple more things that are just very invaluable that are not paint related but are framing related are making sure you have the different hanging mechanisms on hand. So these, and I've shared these before, they go on the back of a canvas or on the back of a frame, and they have these little, they have the teeth, but they also have these pointy bits that you hammer directly into the frame. So they're less fiddly than ones like this that are the same teeth, but you actually have, you have to put you have holes here that you actually have to put nails in. And thank you to those of you that told me that I should use pliers when I'm putting the nails in because I was having such a hard time trying to hold the nail and hammer at the same time because the nail is so teeny tiny. It's like a half of an inch in length. And they're like, oh no, just use a plier. Just use pliers. And I'm like, oh yeah. See, I just do not know all the tools and all the uses of them. So now that I use pliers to hold the nail and then I can hammer it in and it works. So just FYI. It's just a little tip in case you're like me who didn't know that they should be using pliers. But these, they come in like huge sets and I'm using these all the time. And the ones that you hammer in, just remember you have to hammer the edges. Don't hammer in the center. You'll bend it in and that won't be great. And I also use these on like plaques and any sort of artwork that's on wood boards or wooden pieces, not just on frames and canvases. So these are my favorite, the ones you hammer in. But every once in a while, you'll have a frame where where it's extremely narrow and shallow and thin, and so you want to make sure that you're not hammering something that has very thick nails or thick prongs because then you can actually come through the front and you ruin your frame. So always kind of measure if you're not sure to make sure that you're not going to ruin the piece before you put on a hanging mechanism. And the last thing is this, and I'm going to show you guys this in action in a minute. This is a point driver. This is how you can secure art on board in a frame or prints in a frame. But this has been awesome. This guy is a game changer. It's weighted, it's heavy, so useful. And again, all this stuff is linked to my Amazon. Okay, so now I want to show you how I kind of use this guy, the point driver, and also what I'm going to do to this frame. So I got this frame on its own for $5 at the thrift store, and it has a lot of wear around the edges. And this is a perfect candidate for using one of the markers that I'm going to use, and I'm going to show you a close-up of how I do it. And you'll just see me, I'll be filling it in, and then I'm going to be dabbing away with my finger, and then filling it in and dabbing away with my finger. And of course, you can dab away with a cloth or a tissue or whatever you want. I use my finger just because it's just in the moment, that's just quicker. And so I'm going to go around and I'll show a before and after of what it looks like before and what it looks like after. And it just really helps clean it up. Now, there are other supplies you can use. I am a person who does not like to use any sort of chemicals to do things. And so that really hinders a lot of the products that I use when I'm doing this stuff, because I hate any sort of odor, gives me an instant headache, can make me nauseous. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing it, and I'm going to actually like film some footage with my phone to show you, because it's going to be really hard to show you when I'm doing this, but essentially just, you know, marking and dabbing. Okay, so the frame turned out really nicely. I need to let it dry a little bit. It's not perfect, but it definitely has more life back in it. And now the frame is not going to detract from the art, because sometimes the frame makes the art look bad. And that's what I just don't ever want, the framing situation to make someone not buy it, even though the piece of art is really good. Couple things to keep in mind: make sure that you let it dry before you do anything to it and touch it and stuff, because paint and markers both need to dry. And also make sure you have cleaned the frame prior to even starting this whole process, because there's nicotine on frames, there's grime, there's pollution, there's dirt and dust, there's everything you can think of on a frame. And get that all out before you try to apply anything on top, because sometimes stuff just won't adhere to the actual frame because there's a layer of grossness there. So always clean it before you tackle this project. Okay, so the final step is I'm actually going to take this piece of art out of this frame and pop it into this frame, and then we're going to use the point driver to secure it in place. So I'm going to show you that process. But just one final thought about color matching. So sometimes when you're color matching, you need to remember that you need to pull that color beyond what you're trying to repair. So for example, let's say you're repairing a branch of a tree, and you're trying to put the brown in that matches close enough. Well, if you just, colored in where you have that big scratch, you'll definitely still see the scratch because the color won't be perfectly matched. So you need to pull that color beyond the scratch into the rest of the branch a little bit, and then it's camouflaged in. So just know you need to sometimes pull the color a little bit further and beyond the actual spot that you're trying to repair in order to make it look camouflaged in the painting. And then sometimes you actually need to take some of the color and place it elsewhere to make sure that the color is uniform. I do this a lot when I'm repairing frames. Sometimes because the gold is a little bit different than the rest of the frame, I need to take some of that gold and put it into other positions on the frame, and then it looks more uniform and it looks like it's meant to be, rather than one spot that I've repaired. So they're kind of like little tricks that you need to do to pull the color beyond what you're trying to repair, and that makes it more camouflaged. Okay, so let's do the final step. So I'm going to pop this piece of art out of the frame. And the reason why I'm doing that is I don't love the gray frame. I know it matches the gray tones in this piece of art, but I don't know. I just don't love it. I think I would like it better if it was in the wood frame. That's just my opinion. So I can always, change my mind. And if one of you wants this piece of art and you're like, no, I need the gray frame, Andi, I can always, take it apart. So this has a different type. And I don't know if these are technically called point drivers too. But this is an example of what I mean. It's this little fleck here that someone has driven into the frame that adheres this guy in place. So there are many different varieties of this. More modern pieces have the point driver, the metal little tabs that you'll see in a second. But older ones tend to have these like metal things, and it's like staples, I guess. And then they're easily taken out. Sometimes, they're old enough and weak enough where you can just pop them out with your hands. Wow, I'm feeling so strong today. So I'm actually getting these out. Goodness, no, it's really that easy. I'm not a strong person. I do not have very strong arms. So anyways, easily popping this guy out. Usually when you pop out art, there's usually a little bit of a grime around. And so just need to dust that off. And then I'm gonna pop it into this one. And see, I don't know, I just think it looks better. I just like it more, and I feel like there's more people that have a home that will want a deep wood frame versus like a light gray frame. So this also has these staples in it. So I got to pull out the staples. So someone obviously took the piece of art out. Now, if you're having trouble getting out the staples because they're really in there, obviously you can use a set of pliers. I have a drawer full of all sorts of tools, and then you can just pry them out. And that's super easy. Always make sure you have a full toolkit when you're a reseller, because you will need pliers and hammers and you name it for this business, the stuff that people don't tell you to have. So I have a whole separate tool set that's different than the one in my house, because I want to know where all my tools are at all the time. Okay, so I just need to dust this. Okay, 2 seconds, I'm gonna dust this guy. Okay, so dusted and good as new. So I'm just gonna pop it in. Oh, it looks like there's one more staple that I forgot. Pull this out. Okay, and then pop it in here. And it's just a little bit, okay. Gonna press it into place. This one, oh, there's one more staple. One more staple. Oh, he's really flush to the wood. Okay, this is gonna be a tricky guy to get out. Okay, so I have gotten the last piece of hardware out, and then you're just gonna pop it into place. This is definitely like a tighter fit. This is how it looks. Looking really good. And then you take this point driver, and this is where it comes out, this slot down here. And I'll also film some footage of me doing it so you can see it up close. But you take it, you press it down close and up to the very edge, and then you press the button, and then it drives in a little black piece of metal like that. And so I'll go around the whole thing and do that. So if you ever get a piece of art like on board that's falling out of its frame, absolutely you can secure it with this. Okay, so here's the final piece, and this is how many I put in. So just 2 on each side. You don't need to go crazy. Just enough to make the piece flat in the frame and also, you know, eliminate any gaps that you see. You don't want it to warp over time. I think a lot of people get a little trigger happy because this thing is so satisfying to use, and they're just like, they just want to keep putting it in more because it's just a very cool tool. But I love the wood frame, love how it turned out. I will keep that gray frame, so I'm not going to throw it away or give it to Goodwill. I'll probably find a piece of art where I feel like gray was the right choice, but I just really liked how the wood frame just kind of added to, you know, the horse and sleigh type of scene there. They would have had a wood frame. They wouldn't have had a painted gray frame when this was made. Okay, so those are all my art repairing tips. Now, at some point, I will try to film myself in action actually doing a repair on a painting. It just makes me really nervous to do it because I am not an artist. I'm just a creative person. So it seems like just very nerve-wracking to actually show someone, especially anyone out there that is an artist, like watch me trying to color match. I think I do a pretty good job, but I also like am nervous to show you guys on camera. I'd rather describe it than show it, but maybe one day I'll get brave and actually show you the magic that I have done on it. So I didn't learn any of these tips and tricks from professionals or by watching YouTube videos. I just kind of did a lot of trial and error. It was born out of necessity, a little bit of creativity and gumption, and I just went for it with what I had. There's probably better tools and better supplies and better ways of doing a lot of this stuff. And I know some of you out there are actual artists. So please, in the comments below, let us know the tools you use, any YouTube videos that you found helpful or accounts that you follow that you think are really valuable in just repairing artwork or appreciating artwork and just allowing us to sell more artwork that may have flaws. Thank you so much for watching today, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. Take care.